The studio buzzed with its usual pre-show electricity, but tonight there was something else lingering in the air, an undercurrent of anticipation that everyone felt but no one dared to name. Crew members moved briskly between cameras and cables, their headsets crackling with last-minute instructions. The audience filed into their seats, whispering the way people do when they sense they're about to witness something memorable. At the center of the set, under the warm glow of the stage lights, Bill Maher leaned back in his chair, flipping casually through his note cards. His expression was relaxed, but the subtle tightening at the corners of his mouth betrayed something else. He was preparing for a careful strike. Across from him sat Michelle Obama, calm and radiant, her posture poised and elegant. She had the serene confidence of someone accustomed to high-pressure settings, yet there was a certain conversational warmth in her eyes as she exchanged a few light remarks with the producers. She knew the territory, knew the expectations, knew the rhythm of public dialogue. Still, as the countdown to airtime began, even she seemed to sense the unusual tension humming through the space. 30 seconds, a stage manager called out, raising his hand in a swift, practiced motion. The audience shifted, settling in. Bill placed his final card on the desk, then folded his hands as if sealing away the last of his preparation. Michelle smoothed an invisible crease on her sleeve, letting out a small, quiet breath. The applause sign blinked on. Cheers erupted. Cameras swept into position. Bill opened with charm, as he often did. "My guest tonight needs no introduction," he began, sliding into his trademark mix of wit and familiarity. Michelle smiled graciously at the audience's reaction, warm applause, respectful, enthusiastic. The initial exchange between them flowed easily. Discussions of civic engagement, the power of community programs, the resilience of young people today. Michelle spoke with her usual blend of sincerity and eloquence, weaving small anecdotes into broader themes about perseverance and empathy. Bill listened attentively, nodding along, adding occasional quips that elicited laughter. But he kept glancing, almost imperceptibly, toward a particular card at the bottom of his stack. The one he hadn't touched yet. The one that carried the weight everyone inside the production team already knew about. Michelle sensed the shift before it fully materialized. Her instincts were sharp, refined by years of interviews that sometimes turned unexpectedly. She caught the subtle tightening of Bill's posture, the fractionally longer pause he took before speaking again, the way he rested his fingertips against the edge of that one card. "So," Bill said at last, slipping effortlessly into a different tone, lighter on the surface, sharper beneath. "You've made some claims recently that got a fair bit of attention." The room's atmosphere altered instantly, like a collective inhale drawn but not released. Michelle's expression didn't falter, but her gaze sharpened. She turned slightly in her chair, shoulders squared, giving Bill her full attention. She wasn't surprised, not exactly, but she was alert now. Bill continued, "I mean, you know how it is. You say something and suddenly everyone's got an opinion." His smile was thin, a blade disguised as a curve. "But since you're here, maybe we should clarify a few things." A murmur rippled through the audience, not loud, but unmistakably present. Some leaned forward subtly, sensing what was coming. Others exchanged brief glances, as if checking to confirm that they weren't imagining the rising temperature in the room. Michelle offered a measured smile. "Context matters, Bill," she said evenly, her voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable edge. "A lot of what people react to online is missing key pieces." "Sure," Bill replied, feigning casual agreement, "but that's why I thought we'd talk about it here, where you can give the whole story." Michelle nodded slowly. She knew this dance well. The host pushes, the guest steadies, the conversation becomes a tightrope. Bill picked up the card he'd been avoiding. The rustle of paper was soft, yet in the tension-soaked silence, it sounded like a crack of thunder. "You mentioned, recently, that..." Michelle raised a hand slightly, not interrupting but signaling readiness, an invitation for him to finish the thought cleanly. "That certain parts of your experience," he said, choosing his wording carefully now, weren't represented accurately in the media. Michelle inhaled, her expression serene but fortified. "Bill," she said gently, "the media filters things. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Everyone's experience gets reshaped the moment it hits a screen." Bill pressed. "Right, but some people think what you said wasn't just reshaped. They think it was, contradictory." Even the cameraman paused, their hands steady but tense on the equipment. The audience fell into total silence, the kind that swallows sound rather than waiting to release it. Michelle's eyes narrowed just slightly, an almost invisible shift, but one that signaled her patience had been recalibrated. "If you're going to quote me," she said, her tone firm but controlled, "quote me correctly." There it was. The first spark. The audience reacted with a soft wave of murmurs, a rising and falling tide of surprise and anticipation. Some nodded in agreement with her assertion, others braced for Bill's reply. The producers behind the cameras exchanged looks that said everything without words. "Here we go." Bill didn't back off. He rarely did. But he also didn't fire the next shot immediately. Instead, he smiled, not broad, not playful, but with a glint of challenge. "Michelle," he said, I always try to be fair." The moment the question left Bill's lips, the studio seemed to split in two, one half frozen in anticipation, the other half ready to combust. For a breathless instant, the silence was total. Then it happened. Someone in the audience gasped loudly, too loudly, and that single sound cracked the room wide open. Bill watched Michelle carefully, his expression composed but eyes glinting with the thrill of having touched the fault line. He'd pushed, perhaps farther than the producers preferred, but exactly as far as he knew would ignite the night. Across from him, Michelle Obama sat perfectly still, but the slightest tension in her jaw revealed the force of the moment pressing in. She drew a long breath, steadying herself, then met his gaze with a look that was both calm and steel-edged. "Bill," she said, letting his name settle between them with deliberate weight, "I think you're missing the point." That sentence, delivered softly, almost gently, hit harder than any raised voice. The audience reacted instantly. A cluster of people applauded. Another group booed. Others simply erupted into simultaneous chatter, like a roomful of radios switched on at once. The producers sprang into motion, waving frantically to quiet the crowd, but the room was already spiraling into a loud, chaotic storm. Bill leaned back, letting the reaction wash over him with an air of practiced ease, though his fingers tapped lightly against his desk, an unconscious tell. He waited until the noise softened, then leaned in again, voice firm but controlled. "I'm not missing the point," he countered. "I'm asking the question people are talking about." "And maybe," Michelle replied, her tone still level, "the problem is that people talk without understanding." A fresh wave of noise broke from the audience. A few people stood up, not in protest, not in support, but in sheer disbelief at the rawness playing out before them. The intensity of the exchange had peeled away the polished veneer of a standard television interview. This wasn't a conversation. It wasn't even a debate. It was a clash of conviction meeting conviction, framed by bright lights, rolling cameras, and hundreds of eyes watching every twitch and breath. Michelle shifted forward, no longer reclining in her chair but perched at its edge. Her hands moved as she spoke, each gesture measured, purposeful. "When I speak about my experiences, I do so from a lifetime of living them. They are mine, not soundbites, not headlines. Mine. And when they're cut apart and pasted into something unrecognizable, I have every right to say so." She wasn't raising her voice, but its intensity filled the space. Her presence expanded, commanding even the restless crowd to listen. Bill nodded slowly, acknowledging her point, but only partially. "And that's fair," he said. "But when your statements influence millions of people, interpretation becomes part of the equation. Whether you like it or not." Michelle's lips pressed together in a thin, tight line. She inhaled, exhaled, then answered with restrained fire. Influence doesn't erase